Previously on JSpeaks. We see how things panned out. I did end up getting offered that job and took the chief job up in Ferguson. And man, I could be here for the next 24 hours talking about what that experience was like. But to shorten it up some, I was the chief in Ferguson when George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. And with Ferguson being ground zero for Black Lives Matter, you know, his killing, George Floyd's killing, stoked the second round of riots and unrest in Ferguson, and I had to lead the department through those challenges, which, you know, the whole country was dealing with a lot around protests and unrest and things, but Ferguson in particular is a hotbed when things really kick off like that. So that was a very difficult and trying time and experience in my career, but also very impactful because you learn a lot in dealing with, you know, trauma like that, and you learn a lot about yourself, and it helps you to kind of identify, you know, the things that are really important, not just professionally but personally also.
Meet Chief Jason Armstrong, speaker, consultant, leadership coach, and community strategist.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, originally what I wanted to do with my law and policy degree was work in healthcare reform. Like I said, you know, I care a lot about poverty, and one of the largest causes and impacts of poverty is poor healthcare, right? So if you have poor health, you might not be able to work, or if you have something emergent come up, you know, healthcare expenses are the #1 reason why people file for bankruptcy in the United States, by far. So I was interested in working to help people have access to good, high-quality health care, which is what sent me down the road to starting a nonprofit law firm to do Medicaid appeals for free. And when I was in that process, Legal Aid actually got a grant to do Medicaid appeals for free. They had been doing them before, but ran out of grant funding. And I think it was probably like 2014 or 2015 when they stopped and they ran out of the funding. And then in 2021, I think, they got another grant to do it. And so So instead of trying to start my own thing, I decided I'd try to join their team. And they hired internally for that position, but offered me another position and said, if there's another opening, you would have internal hire preference. But what I was offered wasn't really a good fit for me, so I didn't take it. But that whole process really showed me the limitations of the grant-based model, and that there really needs to be something else out there to help bridge the gap for people who don't qualify for free legal services and can't afford to hire a traditional firm.
Hello everyone. For those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. And for those of you who subscribe to JSpeaks, thank you so much and welcome back. As you know, it is my mission, it is my passion to bring to you all conversation topics that are positive, motivational, educational, and informational. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so happy to be here with Rich Gittings, the founder and the executive director of North Carolina Legal Services. North Carolina Legal Services is a nonprofit law firm that offers legal services to assist individuals, families, and small businesses who earn too much to qualify for free legal assistance and cannot afford the high cost of traditional law firms. Rich was born and raised in Mesa, Arizona, and moved to North Carolina to attend law school at the University of North Carolina and earned a master's degree of public policy from Duke University. Rich is passionate about fighting poverty and serving underserved communities. He founded North Carolina Legal Services to address the systemic inequalities in the justice system. Ladies and gentlemen, please sit back, relax, and most importantly, listen. And hopefully after today's episode, you understand for yourself the why behind Rich's commitment to providing high-quality legal services at affordable rates for individuals, families, and small businesses. So Rich, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, of course, of course. So we're at Duke University. And if I'm not mistaken, you went here for grad school.
Yeah, I did a master's of public policy here. We are in the School of Public Policy right now, and somebody on the board of my firm works here and got us in. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you also went to their rival school, UNC.
Yeah, I went to UNC for law school. Yeah, I actually went to both at the same time. So
At the same time?
yeah, so the way that my program worked is it was 4 years, and the first year was the master's of public policy, the first year of that program, and then the next 2 years were the first and second year of law school, and then the fourth year was the two programs together at the same time, just kind of blended. So
Wow.
yeah, so
I thought Duke and UNC were rivals. I didn't know that they worked together like this.
yeah, I don't know how much they actually coordinated the program, but yeah, it was a little bit chaotic when I was doing it. I think that there have been a lot more people who've done that program since I have. So I think it's a little bit more organized than when I was doing it. But yeah, it was a great opportunity.
Awesome. You would do it again if you could?
No. Well, oh yeah, if I could, like, yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm really glad I did it. Would I ever go back to school? Definitely not. So
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Well, before we get officially started, please, introduce yourself. I mean, I personally know you, but for our audience's sake, who is Rich? And talk a little bit about your nonprofit law firm.
yeah, I am the founder. My name is Rich Gittings. I'm the founder and executive director of North Carolina Legal Services. It started as Bull City Legal Services. My original intent was to just serve the Durham community. We serve people who don't qualify for free legal services, but also can't afford to hire a traditional firm. Most regular, like, for-profit law firms, they charge $300-400 per hour, and they usually require the full fee up front. So for most people, most working families, that's not affordable. And so we work with people by giving them, working with them on payment plans, and we offer, our fees are on a sliding scale based on their income and household size.
Wow. So let's take a step back a little bit. What motivated you to seek out law? Did you have a family member who was a lawyer, or like what made you want to go down this path?
No, I actually didn't know any lawyers growing up at all. Well, originally my plan was to work in healthcare reform, which is why I did the policy degree and law school. Kind of along the way, things changed a little bit. I worked at a court where Medicaid appeals were done during law school, and I saw a lot of people come in without an attorney because at the time, there was nobody offering free representation for Medicaid appeals. So if you were denied care by Medicaid and you appealed it, you'd have to go to court and represent yourself. And nobody was providing free legal services for that. So people would come in representing themselves, not having requested their medical records, not having their doctor there to testify. And so, a lot of people with like claims that should have been successful were unsuccessful just because they didn't have the ability to represent themselves, and the system was not designed to help them do so successfully. So I really saw where the gap was there, and that is kind of what set me on my path to what I'm doing now.
Interesting, interesting. Did you ever have like a second option with regards to law, or was this always like your top choice?
No.
Serving the underserved communities.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, originally what I wanted to do with my law and policy degree was work in healthcare reform. Like I said, I care a lot about poverty, and one of the largest causes and impacts of poverty is poor health care, right? So if you have poor health, you might not be able to work, or if you have something emergent come up, healthcare expenses are the #1 reason why people file for bankruptcy in the United States, by far. So I was interested in working to help people have access to good, high-quality health care, which is what sent me down the road to starting a nonprofit law firm to do Medicaid appeals for free. And when I was in that process, Legal Aid actually got a grant to do Medicaid appeals for free. They had been doing them before, but ran out of grant funding. And I think it was probably like 2014 or 2015 when they stopped and they ran out of the funding. And then in 2021, I think, they got another grant to do it. And so, so instead of trying to start my own thing, I decided I'd try to join their team. And they hired internally for that position, but offered me another position and said, if there's another opening, you would have internal hire preference. But what I was offered wasn't really a good fit for me, so I didn't take it. But that whole process really showed me the limitations of the grant-based model, and that there really needs to be something else out there to help bridge the gap for people who don't qualify for free legal services and can't afford to hire a traditional firm.
Have you seen any progresses with the grant process since?
These organizations are always underfunded. There's just not enough public investment in these programs. I think that Legal Aid, which is, I believe, the largest law firm in North Carolina, and they offer free legal services for a large variety of things. I think that they got about 14% of the funding that they needed to meet their mission in 2023. Wow. So it's not, they're just underfunded. I think we got a long way to go on that.
Well, I love what you're doing, and
Thanks,
I love the heart posture with regards to trying to help people who can't afford legal services.
Yeah.
Would you say like you're a one-on-one within Durham, or do you see like a lot of nonprofit law firms, or
doing what I'm doing?
Doing what you're doing?
There's one in the Triad called, I believe, Triad Legal Group. Mm-hmm. They do some family law and a couple other things, and there's one out on the coast called Inner Banks Legal Services. They do some immigration, family law, bankruptcy, but I'm the only one in the Triangle. There was no one in Charlotte until we started offering services in the Charlotte area. So most places, most counties in North Carolina are, I believe North Carolina is the second most rural state in the country. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of counties don't have enough lawyers just to meet people's basic needs. So we're working on expanding into more rural areas as well, but that's taking some time.
Yeah, so talk about some of your services. I was perusing your website. I see that you offer 5 services: family law, small business legal assistance.
Yeah, small business and nonprofits.
Employment law, tenant law.
Landlord tenant, yeah.
And then estate and probate planning.
Yeah, we do estate and probate planning. We're also doing some special education work for people whose individual education plans aren't being met. We're representing parents and children on that as well. The mission is to try to fill the gap between what people can receive for free and what is affordable. So, if for example, a lot of organizations have recently lost grant funding for immigration-related cases for pro bono service for immigrants. So we're going to start doing more of that. So the mission ultimately is to fill the gap to try to make meaningful access to the justice system more broadly available to people. So things can kind of shift and change depending on what's being offered.
Interesting. If you care to share, talk about like a typical day in your...
There's never been a typical day. Yeah. I do a lot of administrative work. So because we offer payment plans, I have to manage those, and that requires a lot of administrative time, reaching out to clients, trying to help them get back on track to pay for their case. I spend a lot of time meeting with community leaders from organizations that serve the same or similar client base to us. Most of our clients probably, at least when it comes to individuals and families, are referrals from community organizations, either the Durham Crisis Response Center or a whole variety of other organizations. So I spend a lot of time developing those relationships and trying to be accessible. I spend a lot of time responding to things that are happening on cases. Something will pop up and there's an emergency, or somebody has something that needs to be filed immediately. They're not a client yet, but they need urgent help. So I spend a lot of time working on those sorts of issues as well.
Are you on call?
If you're asking if I work normal business hours, I do not. Yeah, I don't answer calls past 5 or 6, usually 6. And I generally, if I'm working late or over the weekend, I try to have it be more like catching up on things or working on cases that I'm working.
Is this profession what you expected, or is it more than you expected? Is it like, as far as like the workload and just the day-to-day and the people that you're trying to help?
There's a lot more administrative work than I expected. I'm spending a lot of time trying to streamline some of those administrative processes and automate them. I would definitely say it's more work than I expected. But I don't know, I love it. It's been great. So if I work a lot of hours, I don't mind it because I'm passionate about what I'm doing, and it's very fulfilling. So.
Awesome. So I just want to pivot just a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, perusing your website, I saw on your blog page that you had a blog about DEI.
Yeah.
And that is a very popular topic in this year.
And an unpopular topic.
And an unpopular topic, absolutely.
Yeah.
As you know, a lot of companies, a lot of big name companies have rolled back on the DEI policies.
Yeah.
Just for educational purposes, for me, for the audience, please, if you don't mind going into, what is DEI?
Yeah.
Why should it be important to us, and why is it important to the judicial system?
Yeah. So DEI, it stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's kind of become a buzzword and that a lot of people throw around, and we don't ever really talk about what it means. So I appreciate you asking, and that's the reason that I wrote the blog. Ultimately, what it means is thinking about who systems were designed for, what they're supposed to accomplish, and who is being left out. So a lot of programs that I think we don't think of as DEI programs really are. There's, a couple years ago, the federal government passed a rural broadband bill, and I would say that's a DEI program because there's a lack of access to high-speed internet in a lot of rural areas, and that's a market failure, and so we're addressing it, making sure that people in rural areas are able to be successful by starting businesses online and all the other benefits that come with having high-speed internet, whether they're educational or other things. That's a program that is designed to make sure nobody's being left behind. So, yeah, ultimately DEI is about trying to make sure that people can succeed based on merit, not the circumstances of their birth. And a lot of times when we talk about DEI, we're talking about programs that are based on racial inclusion or sexual orientation or gender. But a lot of people are benefiting from DEI programs and don't even realize it. The Americans with Disability Act is a really good example of that, where we as a country realized or were forced to recognize through protests that people with disabilities were figuratively and literally being excluded in a lot of ways. So, and it's not that architects or business owners had designed things to keep them out, but they just weren't considered in the process of building buildings or designing our cities. So a lot of times people are left out accidentally, and then in other times people are intentionally excluded. So DEI is about trying to restructure our society, our market, our government in ways to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to succeed.
Wow. And so you spoke about, you know, the definition and why it's important to us, but why is it important in the justice system?
Well, the stakes in the justice system are high, like as high as they get. You know, if you're in a system that can incarcerate you, take your kids away, force you to lose your job, your home, there's a lot. The stakes in the justice system are high, and so if we have a justice system that is not inclusive and that's not equitable, it's not really justice, right? Rights on paper that you can't actually access because of systemic barriers or implicit bias aren't really rights that you have at all, right? It's just kind of virtue signaling.
And you bring up a very good point, and I actually want to tackle this. Outside of DEI, just strictly speaking on the justice system,
Yeah.
there's this narrative that there is no justice in the justice system. Do you believe that with the people that you worked with, marginalized communities,
Yeah.
the underserved, do you believe or can you tell that they're hopeful to go through the justice system process or the judicial?
Yeah, because I don't think people would bother if they weren't hopeful, if they didn't think that there's a possibility of a good outcome.
For example,
Yeah.
just to, because I knew you were going to say something like that. For example, people in the marginalized communities, they don't like to call the police.
Totally, yeah.
That's the last option.
Yeah.
But it's just because an individual within that community calls the police and the police show up doesn't mean that they wanted to. It was just, again, their last option or they were peer pressure to do so.
Yeah, totally.
Some people might not like the justice system. They might think that, hey, this is flawed. Like, they're going to see me, they're going to see my socioeconomic status. I'm going to be treated a certain way regardless.
Yeah.
I'm only doing this because I was coerced to by a family member. I was urged to by a friend. But like, what I'm trying to ask is, do you believe that this narrative is prevalent within marginalized communities?
Do I believe that marginalized communities
Are they welcoming to, or do they welcome the opportunity to go through the justice system for whatever need that they might?
Yeah, there's certainly a lack of trust.
There's a lack
in a lot of ways. Yeah, I totally believe that, and I definitely see that. It's pretty common for clients to come to me and my firm and feel, feel like a lack of hope, like you're kind of describing, like the situation is like it's their last place to go, or maybe it's their only place to go in some situations. And I definitely think that, we're talking about structures that were built to exclude people, whether intentionally or structures that were built that don't include everybody, whether they're intentionally excluding them or just designing them without them in mind. And I think that it's pretty clear that in a lot of ways the justice system was designed with discrimination in mind, unfortunately. I think that we've made a lot of progress. There's also a really long way to go, and I think that it's going to take a lot of change, and it's going to take a lot of bold leadership to make those changes because of the way that interests are entrenched, and not even just the justice system, but every system we have. So yeah, I definitely don't think that people are optimistic, when it comes to how they're going to be treated in court, or whether they're going to have an opportunity to speak, or be heard. Will their voice be respected? But I think that a lot of people are hopeful as well, and that they believe that there has been change and that there are people who are continuing to try to make change. So I think a lot of people are optimistic as well.
What change have you personally seen with regards to this topic?
HEART is a really good example of that. Are you familiar with the HEART program in Durham?
No.
So if you call 911 in most places, you basically are going to get a police officer, paramedic, or firefighter who shows up, right? In Durham, we have a program where a social worker could come, depending on the situation. So that has definitely been a step in the right direction, and Durham has really been a leader nationwide when it comes to that sort of alternative emergency services, right? So that's one thing, right? There are so many things that we have to address, but I'm glad that I live in a community where people are thinking about those things and trying to resolve them. And ultimately, it's going to take leadership from people who stick around after the issue's no longer in the news, or after who are determined and committed to resolving the issues, and that are clear-eyed that there's going to be a cost. But we didn't get here overnight. And getting out of this mess is going to take a lot of time and a lot of work. But my work at my firm has exposed me to a lot of people who are working hard and who have committed their careers to make those sorts of changes. So while I recognize that, there's just like an unbelievable amount of injustice in the justice system, I also know that there are people like myself who are working very hard to try to make it better.
Do you believe these recent DEI overturns are kind of pushing us back a little bit?
Yeah, totally. It's yeah, absolutely. I totally do. I think that if we're planning on businesses to get us out of this mess, I don't think that's going to work, right? I think it's going to take people who are in organizing and working in all sorts of different areas of our communities to try to get people together and put pressure on our elected officials. The way that it's very reactive, right? After the 2016 election, we saw a lot of businesses started to embrace DEI, right? And it was kind of a backlash to, I think, a lot of the rhetoric that was going on in politics at the time. And now I think that everybody, has kind of feels like the political pulse is going the other way. But I think that I don't think that it is. I don't think that if you talk to the average person that they're against DEI or that they're against equity programs, if they know what they are. The thing that we have to recognize is that these are really complicated issues that we're talking about. They're really deep, and there's a lot of history behind them. And most people are really busy, and they just aren't putting the time in to learning about these issues and the nuances behind them, and they're getting their information from places that are frankly trying to mobilize them politically, right? And so they're misinformed. But if you sit down with the average person, in my experience, and you explain to them what a DEI program is and why they're important, they're supportive. You say that this is a structure that was created during Jim Crow, right, and it still exists today. And even though people don't want segregation, it's still resulting in segregated schools. And you kind of walk them through the history and you show them the outcomes. Like, most people in my experience are open to change. But the issue that we have on top of that, like, awareness issue, is I think that sometimes people aren't communicating clearly with people, and that we're not doing a good job as leaders explaining to people what these programs are, whether it's because we're using jargon or making assumptions about their intent or a whole variety of things. But I do feel like this is an overcorrection that we're experiencing right now. And when I say overcorrection, it's not a correction. I think that we're seeing they're going too far, and they're going to face a backlash when it comes to how they're treating these diversity, equity, inclusion programs. But we have to just make people realize, explain to them clearly, that these programs are built to reward merit. And I think that when people understand that, they're supportive.
And it's not just DEI too; also affirmative action. They rolled back on it. I mean, I know that Duke I think Duke definitely.
Yeah, and the admissions. Yeah.
On the admissions.
Yeah.
They're one of a couple schools that rolled back.
Yeah. I would consider that a DEI program, affirmative action.
Yeah.
That's affirmative action is a program that exists in order to rectify historic discrimination, right? I mean, for decades, we had black people weren't allowed to go to college, or they weren't allowed to become lawyers, they weren't allowed to become doctors. And so we see now that because of this historic discrimination, even though it's been 60 years since the Civil Rights Act passed, we're still dealing with the history of that. And right now, a person who is black, who has a college degree, has on average the same wealth as a white person who only has a high school degree. And that's history, right? That's not for any reason other than the fact that our systems are keeping some people out. And affirmative action is just one of many tools that we as a society have put into place to try to level the playing field.
So, like, this is a rhetorical question. Yeah. I don't expect you to have the answer for it. But, like, if you know the truth of, or the reasoning behind affirmative action, the reasoning behind DEI, it just seems to me that to save a little bit of money on the back end.
Yeah.
But you are inhibiting a group of people who deserve to be there. It just doesn't seem worth it to me.
Well, and it's not even... Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with that. But I also think that the logic is wrong. The reasoning is wrong. Because when we invest in equity, we're investing in our future. Because if I have an illness, I want the doctor that's sitting in front of me to be there because they worked hard and they studied and they're smart and they're disciplined. I don't want it to be because they were born with economic advantages and their family was able to get them a tutor so that way they did better on the MCAT. And then, I want it to be because of their merit, not because of their race or their economic background or their gender or sexual orientation.
Absolutely. And do you believe how the people are going about, like, at least for DEI, I don't know about affirmative action, but at least for DEI, I know that people have been boycotting Target.
Yeah.
They've been boycotting Walmart. They've been losing, I think it's in the billions, or at least upper 100 millions for Target at least. Do you think that that's the right way to go about I guess, letting these big corporations know, like, hey, you're doing something wrong?
Yeah, I think that it is a way. I think that there is no one right way. There's no silver bullet that's going to get us out of this mess, right? We have to organize, and we have to educate, get people aware of the issues that are going on. And if we just boycott Target, or we just boycott Walmart or whoever else without helping people be aware of the harm that's being caused, I don't think that's a long-term solution.
You don't?
With just boycotting on its own?
Oh,
no,
because
we need an all of the above strategy, I would say. Yeah. Does that make sense? I don't know if I explained that clearly.
I mean,
yeah.
how I take it is just like, let's just say if society is successful in boycotting Target to the point that they go out of business. I'm just saying.
Sure.
I mean, that's
yeah.
Other companies, other businesses that have rolled back on their DEI program would see this and be like, oh, we don't want to go out of business like Target. Let's put it back. Let's reinstate those.
Yeah, you're totally right. I totally agree with that.
But I feel as though that would be a cop-out. I feel as though those companies would still kind of get some type of flack. Like, you're only doing this because, again, you're trying to save your self.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I don't know if you remember in I believe it was 2012 or 2013, when the Supreme Court ruled that same-sex marriage, that states had to allow same-sex marriage. Oreo came out with like a rainbow cookie. All sorts of companies started supporting Pride. You know, we got a big uptick in corporate sponsorships of Pride events. Everyone started throwing rainbows on their logos during Pride Month on LinkedIn. And it's a marketing campaign, right? Ultimately, it's just a way to make people feel like their values aligned, so that way they'll buy their product, right? So I think you're totally right, and I think that if there is pressure put on companies to promote DEI or whatever issue we're concerned about and boycotting for, but that's not real systemic change, and I think that what we ultimately need is systemic change. I mean, I agree that people should boycott discriminatory companies, but I mean, maybe we shouldn't have a system where companies have so much political power, So I think ultimately it's got to run deeper.
So if you're on the front line of, I guess, making these companies aware of what they're doing or helping them to see what they're doing, even though they know, what would you do differently if it's not boycotting? What would be a long-term strategy for you?
I mean, the thing you got to understand about that, I appreciate the question, but I think that the fundamental premise that it's that companies aren't aware of the harm that they're doing. Companies have a legal duty to try to make as much money as they possibly can. If you own stock in a company and they're not trying to be as profitable as they possibly can, you could sue them and you would win. So companies, at least ones that are publicly traded, which is most of our largest corporations, they're legally required to pursue profits over these sorts of moral questions. So I think that ultimately you might convince individual people at these companies that they should support DEI or whatever the case may be, but ultimately they're accountable to their shareholders and to other people who invest in the business. And I think that as successful as you could be in convincing people to support equity programs, I don't know that you would see long-term change because of it.
Yeah, that narrative has to change. I know it's not going to change anytime soon, but
I think sometimes people organize around an issue and we hit a tipping point real quick. I think that if you had said to somebody in 2008, I don't think we're going to have marriage equality anytime soon, I think that you would have been totally reasonable to feel that way. But you would have also been wrong, right? Because people organized around it and made change happen. And I think that if we're focused and we're disciplined and we work together and we get people with a shared interest all in the same room and figure out how we can push in the same direction, I totally think we could make some change.
That's a great point, Rich.
Thanks.
That was a great point. I gotta hand that to you. Another topic that I saw that was very popular on your blog page was divorces in North Carolina.
Yeah.
I saw an article on literally said North Carolina divorces or divorces in North Carolina, children and divorce in North Carolina, and then property division in North Carolina. Please, I know that those are 3 different topics, but if you want to just speak briefly, I mean, it is a popular topic, unfortunately. I think it's like 51 or more than 50% of people in America are getting divorced, so it is definitely a popular topic. So if you care to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main takeaway from that is that on my firm's blog page, we try to have resources for people who can't afford to hire us. So, if you need to get a divorce or you need to write your own will, or you're trying to figure out how your assets should be split after a separation or how custody works, we're gradually over time putting up blog posts so that way people can go on there and try to do what they can to represent themselves. And that all goes back to that experience I was telling you about in the court where for Medicaid appeals, where I'd see people come in and they had a good claim, but they just didn't know how to go about it. So my goal with those blog posts is to try to make more free legal resources available to people.
Well, talk about some of the advice that you share in the blog post, if you can remember.
Just like specifically about
those 3 topics: divorce in North Carolina, children and divorce, and property division.
I think I would probably encourage people to talk to a lawyer because every situation's so different that I wouldn't want somebody walk away from watching this interview and follow some advice that might not fit their situation.
Fair.
So sorry, I'm not trying to dodge, but
No.
so and if somebody has an issue and they can't afford an attorney, they should email me. You can email me contact@northcarolinalegalservices.org, and I'll try to find you somewhere to help you out. Yeah. So I get a lot of those. So.
No problem.
Yeah.
You brought up wills. So I know a popular question is, what's the difference between a trust and a will? You care to answer?
Yeah. Well, a trust is.
Or is it a will? What are the 2 similars? It's a trust and a will, right?
I mean, there's so many different things in estate planning. Trusts are certainly things that people create. And one way to think about a trust would be that it's kind of like a corporation almost that exists outside of the people who create it, and you can transfer assets to it. Or, I mean, I think this is going to be pretty boring, but ultimately, if you creating a trust is something that typically people with better means do to try to avoid taxes and to try to make sure they can transfer assets after they're passing to their children without them having to pay taxes on it. A will is more a statement of what you want to happen with your possessions after you pass away.
But what's the other one that relates to the same topic, like passing away and, I guess, foregoing your assets? Is that a trust? Is it a trust and a will?
Yeah, those are 2 ways to do it. I'll tell you, I don't really practice estate planning law. Me personally, one of my attorneys does. Yeah, and she does a great job. So if you have an estate planning question, let me know and I will connect you. So, generally speaking, trusts are ways to store assets for either tax reasons or benefit qualification. Like one issue that we really have as a country right now is that we don't have long-term care insurance for people. So Medicare does not cover most people's long-term care. So typically what happens is if a person who's elderly, they're on Medicare, let's say they're in their 70s, and they have a lot of assets because they've saved up for retirement. If they fall and they need to stay in a nursing home or they need some sort of long-term care, Medicare does not cover that in most instances, and so they end up paying out of pocket until their net worth is low enough that they qualify for Medicaid. So a lot of people, to avoid that from happening, so that way they don't have to, lose their kids' inheritance on medical bills. They'll instead transfer their assets to a trust. And then Medicaid has a look back period where, for a certain number of years, they'll look back at all your assets, and you can't qualify for Medicaid until you're through that window, if that makes sense. So, if you transfer all your assets to a trust, and then, let's say like 8 years later, you need the long-term care, you might qualify for Medicaid and then not have to lose all those assets because they're secure in the trust. But you shouldn't have to do that, right? I mean, like, people should just have long-term care. I think healthcare and long-term care, all these things should be a guarantee, and it doesn't make sense to me why somebody who's going to end up on Medicaid has to, lose their life savings to get long-term care and, their kids' inheritance to pay their medical bills. Yeah, I mean, that seems, I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
If it doesn't make any sense to you, it certainly doesn't make any sense to the people who are creating it as well. But there's a reason why.
There's a reason why.
There's a reason why.
Yeah. Yeah. There sure is.
And it doesn't sound ethical.
Yeah, well, I mean, the system was designed, again, we're talking about systems design. The system was not designed for the types of people we're talking about. It was designed for people who had more money, right?
Right. So just some general questions about law. What is something or a few things that people get misconstrued about practicing law that you would like to clear up? For anyone who might be listening, who might be interested in this particular path or just law in general.
Yeah.
Things that surprised you, or you went into law thinking one thing and then you're like, okay, this is a lot different than I thought. However you want to take the question.
Yeah, I would say that maybe the biggest misconception that I see, especially when I talk to like law students or recent graduates, is that an attorney's job is not to tell their client no or to try to change their client's mind about something. It's really ultimately about trying to help their client find the best path forward, right? So if you have a client and they say, I want to do this, your responsibility is to try to help them navigate that in a way that mitigates their risk as much as possible, or that's compliant with the law, right? You obviously don't want to help people do things that are illegal, but which takes a lot of creativity, and you have to really know the law, and you have to think about the issues, and it's a lot. It's pretty easy to just tell a client no, that they can't do something, but they're not going to be happy with you if you do that, and you're not really serving them as much as you could be. So if you really learn your area of the law and you introduce some creativity into your practice, practicing law becomes much more pleasant, right? Like, a lot of people are just kind of bored practicing law. And I think in large part it's because they're not having opportunities, depends on the practice area, but to be creative.
So how long do you work with a particular client? I mean, I know that there's not a straight answer, but it could be anywhere between like a month or a couple of years.
Yeah, sometimes a day. I mean, yeah.
Dang,
So
wow.
yeah, I've got a couple cases right now that started in 2023. And so it's been a year and a half or 2 years, and then sometimes I have a client and something's real quick. They just need me to look over a commercial lease that they're getting ready to sign and identify possible issues and make recommendations for things to renegotiate with the landlord, right? So yeah, it really ranges based on the practice area. I'll say that child support, custody, especially custody cases, can go much longer. But some things are pretty fast, like a divorce is if it's not contested, pretty quick.
And how many clients do you work with roughly at a time?
My firm overall?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I think that we probably have close to 50 cases right now.
Wow, is that progress? Is that like big for you guys, or is that small, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, we've been around for about 2 years now, so there's quite a bit of growth. I started out I took my first case in April of 2023, and then, so yeah, 2 years later, I feel pretty good about it. So.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we're serving the Triangle area, and the Charlotte area in North Carolina. So.
And you're going to have a Charlotte office?
We already serve the Charlotte area. We don't have a physical. We will do our services remotely in Charlotte, just like we do here. But yeah, we have hearings in Charlotte quite frequently.
Beautiful, beautiful. So if someone was interested in starting their own nonprofit law firm or a law firm in general, what advice would you give them?
That's a good question. I would say to build a team. Don't try to do it yourself. Try to find people who have skills, experience, expertise that are different than yours, and try to work with them and try to expand your knowledge base where you can, but also let people help you and trust them. If they've earned your trust, let them do what they need to do. So a lot of it is like tech stuff for running my firm, because we do everything remotely and people schedule consultations online, and a lot of things happen in an automated way, and I didn't know how to do that. So I found somebody to help me. And there are a lot of different facets to starting a law firm or nonprofit. Ultimately it's just like a business, So you might need to consult with people who have experience with that. So I'd say build a team of people that you trust and talk to them regularly about the problems that you have, and try to work things through, rather than just trying to do everything on your own.
So how long were you working on your own before you started to build your team? Because you said you started in April of 2023.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. A lot of the people that I would say are on my team, or I've known for a long time. I just haven't necessarily needed to tap into their skills or expertise. I was freelancing before I started my firm, and that was pretty simple. It wasn't very complicated. But yeah, I think I've just kind of been building it along my way.
So what motivated you to, or what pushed you to go from freelancing to what you do now?
Well, it was that whole process of starting beginning to start the firm doing Medicaid appeals, and then learning more about legal aid and how that worked. Because originally, my intent was to work in healthcare in some way, in healthcare access. And it was not until I really understood this issue that I really saw the opportunity for me to make a difference in it.
And do you plan on expanding your team over time?
Oh yeah, just brought someone on for employment law, and for administrative assistance as well. I'm always looking to expand my team. I'm probably going to hire another family law attorney soon, because our family law attorney is pretty busy. We have 2 right now, and probably need to hire another. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was looking to find good people to help out. So.
I bet, especially with you expanding to Charlotte, there's probably going to be more.
Yeah.
Not probably. There's definitely going to be more.
Yeah, Charlotte. It's kind of unbelievable that Charlotte hasn't had this sort of sliding scale firm. I know they had some stuff like this in the past, but it was largely funded through philanthropy, and so once that dries up, the law firms kind of went away.
So you're the only nonprofit law firm?
Not nonprofit, but sliding scale in Charlotte. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, legal aid. There's all sorts of nonprofits that provide legal services in the Charlotte area, but they're all largely based on grants. So unless there's a grant that funds something, people are kind of out of luck. A pretty good example of that would be domestic violence survivors. It's really common for someone to need to get a restraining order against a former partner, but then legal aid will do that for free, right? Regardless of your income, because often, even if on paper it looks like you have a lot of money, usually there's financial abuse in situations like that, and they don't actually have access to pay an attorney. So legal aid does it for free, which is an incredible service, but they usually can't help with child support or custody or visitation, or helping that person get equity out of the home when they get a divorce. So yeah, there are a lot of limitations on what sorts of services people have access to, especially if they're limited by income.
So do you work in tandem with legal aid, or or do your clients have to like reach out to you and legal aid separately, or?
We don't have like an official partnership or anything like
Okay.
that. If that's yeah, but it's not uncommon for us to be serving a client in
The
different
same
areas.
client.
Yeah, and if somebody comes to me before they talk to legal aid and they say, I've got all these things I need help with, I'll send them to legal aid. They can get anything for free, or any other organization. There's Justice Matters. There's a lot of different organizations in the Triangle or Charlotte that provide different types of services.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
So I read on your LinkedIn in your bio that outside of legal services, you are very interested in progressive
Doing some
politics.
research, man.
I have to.
Yeah.
Progressive politics and activism, specifically affordable housing and elections.
Yeah, I've done some elections work and some work on affordable housing.
So care to share your interests in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, my legal work with my firm and my political work, working on elections, I volunteered on Justice Riggs' campaign. I've done advocacy work for affordable housing. These to me are all just different ways of approaching the same issue of structural inequality. Elected officials matter, which is why I care about politics, and they can really make a difference. We also have like a real need to raise public awareness and organize people around issues, which is why I've been involved in advocacy work. And then with my firm, we can treat some of the impacts of systemic inequality. So.
Nice, nice. So were you very active in like, clubs in college? You seem to be very comfortable and very open to be around people, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because I know that I was in clubs in college as well, and I have leadership positions, and I was, talking with the general
Go-getter.
body.
Yeah.
So I'm just asking, because like, where did this? I mean, you talked about why you do what you do, but a lot of people have passions to work in certain spaces, but they're not the best with people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it seems like you have both of those.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah.
It sounds like
yeah.
it.
Yeah, I was involved in lots of different organizations during college, and and I enjoyed it a lot. I was president, I was a member, and then president of the Pre-Law Society, and then we also had a Public Policy Society, and a member, and then I was a president. Those were I think pretty foundational to a lot of the things that I'm doing now. At least they kind of gave me a foundation of understanding that I've built upon since. But it's a good first step.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Rich, do you have any lasting comments that you'd like to share with the audience? Anything that you would like to leave with or state with regards to your practice and just who you are as a person?
Can you repeat that? I'm not sure.
No, do you have any lasting comments that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Oh. Yeah, I think I would just say that, you're just talking about how people care about the issues and they maybe don't know how to be involved, or they feel like they don't want to be in front of people. There are lots of ways to get involved, and whatever your skill set is and whatever your interests are and whatever your comfort level is with certain things, if you're interested in an issue and you want to make a difference, people will find ways for you to help. So reach out to community organizations, advocacy groups, nonprofits, and people are always looking for help.
Awesome, and I agree. Well, thank you so much, Rich, for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a pleasure seeing you again.
Yeah, you too. Yeah.
What you're doing is very necessary. It's very needed, and I'm glad that someone like you, who's comfortable working with people, who's comfortable taking, the workload of serving people who unfortunately don't have the means to hire an attorney or those types of finances, that you're doing that. I'm sure that you've impacted multiple people's lives outside of the 50 clients that you're working with, and I'm here to just tell you to keep going and keep serving, and I hope that your practice, your firm grows as it seems to be growing right now. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.